second.
Okay.
All right, now you're alive.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, all of those out in virtual land. My name is Terry Lomax. I'm the chair of the Maritime Advisory Board. This is our July regular meeting. I will, as usual, will introduce starting with my window, the way everybody's arranged on my window. We have Alan Miller, who's a member. We have Peter Trogdon, who's a member. We have Beth Bellis, the harbor master. We have Frida Wildy, member. Mike Tomasini, member and vice chair. Andy Fagley, member. Jake Iverson from Watermark. We have Heather Skipper, who's joined us at, I think Debbie invited you, did she not?
Did.
Steve Rice from the city of Annapolis. Kimberly Consoli is our reporter. And we are fortunate to have Alderman Ross Arnett this evening. Although he is now he's Kimberly Ross just moved on me, so now I see him. All right, everyone, we will just get started. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes from June of 23. They were circulated some time ago. I did not have any recommended changes. Does anybody have any changes? And if not, is there a motion to adopt the June 2023 minutes? Mr. Bagley has moved to adopt the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Wildy seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Kimberly, we got everybody. The next item is our who went to the meet? Frida, did you go to the meeting or attend the virtual meeting, or was there one?
It's not until the last Monday of the month. So it's a virtual meeting and I'm on track. I've communicated with Hamilton
right.
and their staff. So I'm on track to participate.
It's next week. Andy?
Eric.
Yes.
I was the previous one.
I know. I
Okay.
jumped in reverse order. So what happened in May or in June?
Great. They sort of grilled me on what we had been doing in our meeting, and I gave them a basic rundown of things. Their meeting was relatively straightforward and relatively expedient. There's been I don't forget what you call it when somebody put out money to do a study of a 5-county ferry system to move people, not cars. It's not to alleviate the Bay Bridge around the mid-Bay area. And they don't have much to say about it, but it is something that somebody's just looking into. They have a grant to do a study on. So that's in the works. I don't know if anybody's heard about that. Otherwise, they were looking at board seats are all full and everybody's in for 3-year terms. And they were adding Jesse Iliff. And then the Waterway Improvement Fund, they were saying that people need to make noise if they want the Waterway Improvement Fund to pay for stuff in Anne Arundel County. Anne Arundel County's got to make more noise about it because basically those funds are mainly raised here because that's where the most registered boats are, and that the funds are mainly distributed to the more far-flung counties at this point, and that we should make a point of saying our industry requires this for this or that or whatever was their point. So I didn't have much else to say. They did inquire a lot about what our meeting was about, and I talked to them rather extensively about the houseboat situation and what's going on with that. But I did not talk to them about the current proposals that are out there for city dock stuff. I meant to include that and I didn't, but that might be something for Frida to think about if she wants to mention that.
That probably helped shorten the meeting.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
Beth, are you are the grants that you are doing particularly with respect to the street ends, are those do any of those fall under the Waterway Improvement Fund?
Yeah, so we usually apply for
$1 million. So we usually pick 3 to 4 projects, and the maximum for each one is 250,000. And we put them in priority order. We don't always get all of them, but we do very well. We get there's only 11 million in the total pot for waterway improvement, and Annapolis City definitely gets her share.
Okay, thank you. Glad to hear that. Stephen, what do we have update wise on the economic development front?
Well, we definitely, I think, have some good news, and but before I get to that, I'll just start with the statistics. How's my audio? Because I haven't used it from my office. And
Audio is good.
okay, great, thank you. So our citywide commercial vacancy rate for June is 6.2%. We have 5 new expanding or relocating businesses within the city during the May-June timetable. During the month of June, economic development also provided assistance to 38 businesses and partners. And we had 1 ribbon cutting for the month of June. That was All Dolled Up Salon. That was on June 16th. But more importantly,
I guess you could count the city garage as a ribbon cutting of sorts too.
well, that was the good news. So you stole my thunder. Economic development coordinated a sneak peek for the Hillman Garage for downtown businesses. We did that on June 7th, and we actually, I think we had north of 40 businesses that participated. That was a nice event. And of course, we helped to plan the grand reopening ceremony on June 14th. So that's the biggest news. We also are happy to report that the Annapolis Blues, although this didn't happen during the month of June, which is what I report on in July, but the Annapolis Blues won not only their regular season championship, but also the conference championship for the Mid-Atlantic Conference. So we're really excited about that. And then the other piece I did want to touch on, maritime reporting. I just want to share, I'm getting close to submitting my report to planning and zoning, but we had 27 properties that responded out of a total of 46 that we reached out to. And looking at the statistics, we have 61% of the square footage is maritime, 27% is non-maritime, and we have 12% that is vacant. Total square footage, we're looking at 358,735 square feet. So I'm going to check a few things. I do need to return a few phone calls from some property owners or property managers that did not submit electronically or respond to my paper survey. So these numbers might adjust a bit in the coming week, but this is ballpark what we're looking at present.
So if I heard you correctly, the maritime vacancy rate is about double the overall city vacancy rate?
So it's challenging to make that takeaway because this is for 2022.
Okay.
So we initially asked for these figures in, I guess it was November of 2022. We're hoping to get the information in December. Then we asked for the information again. I think it was March. But these are 2022 stats, and our 2022 vacancy rate for Eastport is not nearly this high. It's much lower. And also, the other piece is that I have 59% of the properties reporting, and so 41% are not reporting, and that could skew the numbers pretty significantly.
One a cynic might, and I'll just add, and then I'll let Ross speak too. A cynic might opine that the 41% that didn't report are perhaps not as compliant as the 59% that did report. Ross?
So, Terry, this was your amendment to 025-21. And as far as I know, reporting was not voluntary. It was mandatory. And so I'm very concerned about this very tardy and lack of reporting. This was supposed to be the #1 enforcement tool to make sure that the new changes to the maritime zones would be adhered to. And so my question to the group and to Steve in particular is, do we need some new legislation to not only make sure that this is mandatory reporting, but start to impose fines for non-reporting?
Well, certainly we would. You're absolutely correct that the goal was to make sure when we did make the changes to the zoning and change in particular, the percentages of non-maritime, that it picked up those that were already non-compliant and essentially helped bring them into compliance, but also you're exactly right. It's a tool to see what, if anything, we need to do, in years going forward. I don't remember off the top of my head, Stephen, you can perhaps enlighten me, what the enforcement mechanism was in the statute. Probably a fine would be less important than the threat of pulling their occupancy permits, but that might be a little draconian. I'm going to make.
I'll just add that this information is not only useful for things like the making sure that we are getting compliance for the new changes, the new leniency, the new flexibility in the maritime zones, but also this is information that I am trying to use to support other legislation, in particular outdoor dining. And I'm trying to make the case, in the case of outdoor dining, that Ward 8 is different than the other wards because we have a much longer shoreline. We have many more marinas, many more slips. And if we do things like put in parking zones or parking districts, it's going to have an immediate and very adverse impact on maritime activities in Ward 8 and I think largely in the city. So getting this information is not just so we'll have it. It really is information we need to use. And I'm quite distressed that we don't have full compliance. It was, I think that the legislation was passed trying to be flexible for the industry, and yet we have this non-reporting. And I mean, it's a huge amount of non-reporting. It's not trivial that 41% or whatever the number is, Stephen, are not reporting.
Stephen, is there a way to cross-reference the 41% that have not reported with the occupancy permits that have been issued to them? And I see your hand, Frida. With the occupancy permits that have been issued, and then simply do a visual check as to whether or not the actual occupancy matches up with the occupancy permits.
We can try. That's a little challenging too, because when it comes to the reporting, we're reaching out to the property owners, and for the use and occupancy permits, those are the tenants primarily, who are taking up space on the property. So if we were, to do anything with the UNO permit, that would, of course, hurt the tenant, which I guess indirectly would, cause some angst for the property owner, but it wouldn't be directly felt necessarily by the property owner. And the tenant, isn't the one who's non-compliant. So it's a little tricky. I mean, we can try to marry, some of this up, but it's
Well, wouldn't it marry,
a
it
bit of a
would
challenge.
marry up by the address, correct? I mean, if you just cross-reference the address, you can then get the occupancy, the list of occupancy permits at address X. And then see if the owner of address X has reported, or vice versa.
Yeah, we can try. We can try. The other challenge with regard to the owners is that, a lot of this is ABC LLC with, PO box wherever they have a PO box. So it's for a lot of these properties, it's hard to actually, it's challenging to get someone, on the phone and have someone to actually talk to. And your main, because they're privately held, your main method of correspondence, unfortunately, is snail mail.
Frida,
So before we talk about fines, could we, and Stephen, I know that y'all are so busy and everything, but would it be possible to do a quick reach out to just a small sample of those that are not in compliance and get their version of why they're not in compliance before we start levying fines and stuff? Because, I mean, a quick visit to an office or something, would that be possible to see a small sample of why they're not in compliance?
Well, I think the challenge is finding the offices for many of these privately held LLCs where all we really have is a PO box. That is a challenge. The other piece is that I unfortunately, I think that, for some of these property owners, there is a little bit of a disincentive to report, maybe, because, if they are, for those that, may be above a certain threshold, they could potentially incur a very, small, I forgot what we're calling it, but let's, I won't say the T word, but assessment that, would go into our maritime industry fund. And so I think it's, there may be a disincentive amongst some to actually report, particularly if they have a higher than allowed non-maritime percentage.
Stephen, would it be possible, and we're not going to have an August meeting, so it would be a September meeting anyway. Would it be possible to provide, and you can provide it to me and I can distribute it to the board ahead of time, a list of that 41% as to who, either by LLC name, which won't mean anything, and physical address?
Well, I will run that up the flagpole if it's okay with, the lawyers and, the department head. It's okay with me.
Okay. I'm going to just tickle that for September. And yes, Ross.
So I have to tell you that I was not particularly happy with the changes with the Maritime and felt that we were, in fact, diminishing the very purpose of the Maritime zones, but it was because of this change and this alone. And I am not inclined to be lenient. I am not inclined to let this go. So I'm putting out a marker right now that unless we get compliance, I am going to go back to legislation and try to get this compliance and get this enforcement. This is information we need to know. The very purpose of the maritime legislation is to protect maritime. I'm struggling to protect Maritime and Ward 8 from restaurant incursion, and I cannot really abide by this lackadaisical non-compliance. It's not an option. Compliance is something that has to occur. So I will wait till the September meeting, but I have to tell you, I am very, very concerned and very unhappy about this lack of compliance, and am very, very willing to take some more legislative action unless we get some satisfaction here.
And Ross, perhaps, and I understand and appreciate Stephen's flagpole reference, but it also, I wonder whether a request from council for the same information might help raise the flag a little higher up the flagpole.
Believe me, that will be occurring.
Okay. All right, Stephen, you've now touched on 2 points. I'm looking to see if there's anything else you have for us?
No, I think that's it.
All right, I think that's all that I have on your plate, so you can stay or go as you wish.
Thank you.
Let's turn to Beth. There's 2 or 3 items for Beth, or regular items on the agenda. Street End Parks, Truxton Park, and just what's generally happening at City Dock on the charter side.
I guess I'll start with street end upgrades. Great news on Tucker Street. That project has finally moved to the permitting process. You may recall it was in the concept phase last time we talked. So that's good news. Cheston was supposed to begin in May. The contractor couldn't get the sheet piling from the mill on time, so he moved crews to other projects. And now the construction is expected to begin in August. I don't have any other updates that would be new from past times other than to follow up on Truxton Park. The city of Annapolis is hiring a marine engineer to assess the stray electrical current in the waters adjacent to Truxton Park. So we're just about finished with the scope of work, which we will send out hopefully by the end of this week. And I forwarded all those details for Terry. I won't read them because they're long. The scope of work is quite specific and rather long, but we're hoping for some. When the contractor's all done, I will say part of his scope of work will be that he has to present to the city council and also make himself available for questions and answers from the city council. So it's quite specific. I could share more in writing if there's more time. You want me to cover Charter Dock? Charter Dock is also still a bit busier than it was in the past, which is probably the busiest ever. 144 charter bookings so far this year. Just a hair more, maybe 10% more than in past years. And we're getting a nice variety now. So we probably have like maybe 8 or 10 different groups that are using the Charter Dock, and that's kind of nice to have some variety there. And then what else did you want me to cover, Terry?
We had Street End, Charter Dock, and Truxton Park, so you've covered them all. I did have a question about Street End. Did I see that something recently about funds for 3rd Street or 4th Street? And I don't remember. I saw something in the Capitol or what, but or maybe I'm just misremembering.
I haven't seen anything like that.
All right.
Gary?
Yes.
One question, Beth, if I may.
Sure.
Which was the street that you're expecting to start in August and do sheet piles?
Cheston.
Cheston? Okay.
Yeah, it's getting a new bulkhead and a floating pier, and I guess they're gonna redo that rain garden.
Excellent. Thanks.
Alan and Scott and Alan, an update on the Maryland Maritime Hall of Fame / endeavor.
Okay, I've got a few notes. And Alan probably has some comments too. We had 2 meetings, one with Ellen Moyer on the 21st of June. And it was a good meeting. She had lots of ideas and wrote a summary, which is sort of over the boundaries that we talked about, that Alan and I talked about. But she's gung-ho for something like the local Maritime Hall of Fame. And we probably should have a meeting, Terry, with you and just go over some of these things, the ideas that were tossed around. And she said she was going to meet with the mayor, and I noted clearly, please don't mention this to the mayor at this point, because she's like full speed ahead, on her mind, and I don't want it to get out of control, because some of our ideas may not be in agreement with our endeavors as the board. And Ross, I could brief you on it sometime too. Maybe next time we can meet with Terry and Ross and just go over locally and where to go with it. But the discussions were very good, and Ellen was super gung-ho on the thing, and was saying, well, let's do this, let's do that, and use the Annapolis Community Foundation for grants and funneling grants. She was going a little too fast on the thing, I think. And she even wanted to use the new Harbor Master building and perhaps the Burtis House for an exhibition point, which that was just her idea. We didn't endorse it or do anything, but we all talked about Alan's idea of having signage at street ends with different, whether it's a walking tour or whatever, but have signage for the people in the Hall of Fame. So everybody thought that might be good. That was the first meeting. And then the 26th, we met with the Maritime Museum, Alice Estrada and Bill Schweitzer, or whatever his name, vice chairman of the board, and Schweitzer, excuse me, and Bill, I forget his name, but had a good meeting with them, and they are all for this kind of thing. And they want to make sure that it has diversity included in it, which we all agreed with, and they would endorse it. The question is, what would they do to participate? And they said they're very tight on resources. So if they did something in cooperation or partnered with it, they didn't want to commit any resources towards it. Now, I don't know what that means, just financial resources, or if something could be housed there, but we can have more discussions. But they weren't against it. They thought the idea was good. So that was a good meeting. And it's a matter, I think the next step would be to have a small group on the Maritime Advisory Board come up with the points that need to go out, and the organizational structure, hypothetically, what the organizational structure should be, as its own standing 501c3, or is it part of this Annapolis Community Foundation, or is it sponsored by the city? Those kind of things. So we probably should have a discussion internally about that. Alan, do you have any other comments from our meetings?
No, I think you hit it on the head. I would just reiterate, at this point in time, I think we need to sit down and talk about it and figure out who's going to be the ownership of this, because everybody thinks it's a good idea. Some owners, it's just going to take a little bit of work, and until somebody is willing to say, yes, I will haunt you this a wee bit, that's the next step. We need to do that.
Yeah, and the museum could be a natural owner, but they didn't seem to want to step up to the plate with ownership or commit. Their word was, we can't commit any resources, but they think it's a good idea. So that's something, Ross and Terry, maybe we should meet and just go to the next step and draw up somewhat of a game plan to at least know where to put efforts rather than just getting information. But we've got good information now. I think it's a good idea, and they do. And so they each made points towards it, and I've got notes on it. So and thanks to Alan for his input too.
So what I might suggest is, since we don't have a meeting in August, Scott, if you wouldn't mind, just send out an email to Ross, Mike Tomasini, myself, Alan, and throw out some dates.
Okay.
Either early, I know Mike is on the water quite a bit, everybody's got jobs, so either early in the morning or late in the afternoon, maybe sometime after the 29th, because I won't be back till the 29th, and see, maybe we can try to fit something in August.
Okay.
And have something to bring back. The other
You're
thing
out,
that,
you're out of town until the 29th of July.
yes.
Okay.
The other thing that, as you were talking, and it segues back to the conversation that we routinely have about street in parks, is whether I mean, all of the street in parks, we've just all have a generic Cheston Street, street name designation. I'm wondering if there's is it worth considering working in basically dedicating a street in to an inductee, so that is at the end of Shipwright Street, it's the Arnie Gay Street in Park or something along that line. If we're talking broader than Annapolis, that might get a little more problematic if you're talking about a Maryland Maritime Hall of Fame as opposed to Annapolis.
I think with respect to that, I should have mentioned that it was fairly unanimous on both from Alan's standpoint and the Maritime Museum to keep it local in the Annapolis area. And my feeling was that if you're counting people in the oyster, the waterman industry, they might be South River, Mill Creek, that kind of things. But no one wanted to go all of Maryland or Eastern Shore. They figured that was too much to take on. I think, Alan, you read the same thing, did?
Well, we only have 28 street ends anyway, so. But that's, I just throw that out because it occurred to me as we were talking about street ends and signage, et cetera, the two, there might be some marriage of those two ideas along the way.
We can talk about it, but it was the consensus both with Ellen and with the folks in the Maritime Museum was to keep it more local than all of Maryland or half the Chesapeake Bay. So that was their point.
All right. Next item is the 2040 comprehensive plan. I had asked Eric Lashinsky to join this meeting. He was unable to do so. He had another commitment. So I suggested that we originally, and I sent a note out to everybody on the board about the possibility of switching, canceling this meeting and having an August meeting. But it turns out that our August meeting falls the day after Eric leaves for vacation. So he couldn't make that either. So we just stuck with the original general city plan of not holding meetings in August. He will be available in September. It's getting close. That's up against sort of the 90-day comment deadline, although I'm not sure that entirely applies to us as a board. But I would ask that everybody between now and then take a look at the 2040 comprehensive plan. I did not detect, although I have to confess, I didn't go into it in great depth, but I did not detect a strong plan for the Maritime. It spoke in much more general terms, and I was a little concerned about the lack of any specificity or even particularity with respect to the Maritime. And I'd ask that everybody take a look at that, because I think there should be, in the past two plans, there's been a specific section addressing protecting maritime, growing maritime, the importance of maritime to the city, et cetera. And that seemed to have been dropped out at this point. And I'm concerned, since we're talking about it now, a 20-year plan, that may not be sending the right message to the future council and planners as to what to focus on in the city. So, but take a look at it. It's online. Yes, Ross. You're unmute.
Let me give you a little more timeline context. First of all, it's 400 pages without another 400 pages of appendices. So I don't truly know of anyone, including myself, who has read the whole plan. There may be some saints out there, but the timing is that the Planning Commission is commencing tomorrow night a series of 6 meetings that they're going to be holding with people. Then the City Council at the beginning of the year, Resolution 1/2023, formed a citizens committee to review the comp plan. It's kind of the reverse of the way comp plans in the past have worked. It usually started with a citizens committee. They came up with recommendations and drafts and went back and forth with the planning staff in public hearings. But we think, particularly because of the length of this, and because there's a huge focus on housing in this comp plan and not on things like maritime, the council views that it's important to have as much public input as possible. The commission, the Citizens Commission, will be comprised of people selected by City Council, but also other members from business and maritime communities. And they're going to be charged with reading all 400 pages and holding at least 3 public hearings, at least 2 of which are at nighttime, so that people can attend, and then forwarding to us their recommendations on amendments to it. So it's long to read, but you do have some time. So I would encourage everyone to take the time to look at this. It is going to be controversial on the council, and I think we're going to need all the citizen input that we can get on all aspects of city life. End of commercial.
If I could ask that, as the citizen committee is appointed, if someone off of this board would be, and we all qualify, I hope, as a citizen, if one of us as a citizen would be appointed, or even if it's just in an ex officio capacity, that would provide some liaison back to the board, at least on the maritime issues. All right, we didn't, when I had Beth, we didn't talk about house barges. The last time we spoke, I believe you had mentioned that there was either discussions with or enforcement actions ongoing, and you did not provide a whole lot of information. We're not able to provide a whole lot of information. Where are we on house barges, and is it something that we're going to need to be addressing over and above the current code provision that I think is 1 per 50 slips or whatever it is in the code?
So there's still outstanding cases. So I wouldn't be able to speak about house barges this evening.
Okay. When are those cases set?
I don't even believe they're set in yet.
Okay. All right. No news is no news. Last item currently is under new business, and I just wanted to provide a little more update from the last, I guess it was 2 meetings ago, when we had Eileen Fogarty gave us a presentation on City Dock, and there was a fair amount of discussion about the bus access, et cetera. And the slides that the slide presentation that she had did not show any bus parking. And I had recalled that there had been bus parking, or certainly a designated bus drop off and area on City Dock, and there seemed to be a fair amount of confusion. So I followed up with her, and she did go back and she had apologized to me, to pass on to the board, that she was sorry she had not realized that the slide from the actual city dock plan was probably should have been part of her slide. But what she did was she provided me with the plan that is currently in the city dock plan, and I'm going to, if I can remember how to do share screen. I think that's it. So this is the bus access and parking that actually is currently part of the city dock plan as envisioned. And this was the drawing that I had remembered from before. And as you can see, the circulation was somewhat as she described, down Dock Street, down Craig Street, back out Prince George Street and out. But there were two designated areas right in here, right up to where the city dock park areas, or Dock Street Park, I guess it's called, would start. That location does not preclude what she was talking about being able to somehow maneuver down Dock Street for a little closer drop off. But I just wanted to share with everyone that this particular drawing apparently is still in the plan. And Jake, I'll ask it. She mentioned, I think this drawing, Jake, you had seen also.
I did see this drawing. I thought it went directly up Prince George Street rather than making that right on Randall, just because the size of the buses. I don't believe they could make that right.
I agree
Heather,
with you there.
Heather may have that experience with that, but I don't believe they can make that right.
They can make the right, but it's very restricted because there's parking on both sides of the street there. So it's very tight.
So we would have to eliminate some of the parking spots and able to make that, and maybe back up the incoming traffic, maybe 20 feet or so the bus could get around. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and I did speak with Eileen recently, and it does show 2 simulated buses there, but she mentioned there's plenty of room for many more buses is what was mentioned.
Well, it depends on whether those parking spaces are there or not. But yes, and I just really wanted to update everybody. I didn't envision any. I was concerned that, number one, that Jake had not seen this, or that there had been some change to what Jake had been consulted about. I know there had been a lot of discussions with Jake and with other stakeholders that have a stake in having buses available for pickup and drop off. And I really just wanted to share the picture to close that loop with everybody.
And this diagram is new to me. I have not seen this until this week, but I do have other ideas that could work, and I'll reach out to Eileen and Bryce about that. But I mean, potentially what comes to my head is if you're familiar with Rehoboth Beach, where they have that Main Street, and then at the end of the dock, they have that kind of amphitheater there. They have an area, and I can't use my cursor here to kind of draw it, but there is kind of a access for larger vehicles to come back around this water fountain almost up to Susan Campbell and make that huge loop.
Are you talking
So
about
basically-
you're talking about, and I'll use my cursor. Are you talking about coming down Dock Street and then around this way?
Yeah, and where your cursor actually was, I would come closer to Susan Campbell, but you could actually continue that and just make a big loop, and it doesn't have to be active all the time. Just when we have larger, large buses or groups coming, or elderly or mobility challenged. But I think that we really could make some sort of loop around there, just skimming Susan Campbell Park. I think it could work.
Well, I think take that up with Eileen and basically the traffic engineer people, because if that's a recommendation that might be workable, we can certainly consider it at our, at a future meeting.
Yeah, sure.
It'd be September, and make a recommendation. You're talking about basically through this white area here.
Correct. And then, from what I understand, that area right near the cursor is a stage. So, if we did have concerts there, we could, there are buses. I mean, it'd be like a backstage. I'm thinking outside the box, but
Yeah, I mean, you obviously can't go you can't go past this bulkhead here.
right.
But,
Yeah.
but that's, yeah, I guess continue that conversation with Eileen, and keep us posted.
Yep, we'll do.
I have a small question, Terry, and maybe Jake too. The city is, part of this is obviously the street end park, or the street park here. But the city is running a marina de facto, with Eagle Alley as well as a charter dock and the basin. And I'm just thinking out of the box a little bit, along with the buses, which I totally agree with what you're saying, Jake, maybe having something down there. You also have to have the fire trucks able to go down there, but the day-to-day running of a marina includes getting supplies to boats, much less the charter boats at the end of the dock, but the various boats around. And if there's not going to be a street access for dropping off deliveries, there's going to need to be some infrastructure for carts or golf carts or something that you can take equipment and supplies to boats all along there, or people are going to have a hard time parking their cars somewhere upstream and getting supplies for their crew or guests or whatever coming down with the boat, food, et cetera, et cetera. So that might be something just to put on the list to, when you're thinking about having buses go down there, but also have access for, or have the plan to have carts. I'm not sure how you minister, the harbor master's office would rent them or something. I don't know, but I think as a marina right now, you can drop things off by car going all around there, but that should be considered as well in the plan of the infrastructure operational ease of operation, or folks aren't going to want to come to Annapolis as much if they virtually have to walk with their supplies 2 or 3 blocks in hand.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott.
So just something for the list.
Any other
Terry.
questions, comments on this drawing before I unshare?
Terry?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Andy Fegley here. Oh, just on the NIMBY front, I live on Prince George Street, and the only time buses come up our street is when they're lost. And there's not a single intersection a bus can make a 90-degree turn off of Prince George Street. It's too narrow. There's parking on both sides. When they get to the top at St. John's, it can be a 5 or 10-minute affair to get a bus around the corner up there. So wherever you're planning on taking buses has to be A, thought out, B, it's going to obviously negate significant numbers of parking spaces. If in the drawing, it would be on King George and Randall Street there, that you'd have to eliminate at least 2 parking spaces probably on each one. If it was further up Prince George, it would be probably even worse.
So, Jake, let me ask you, what currently, how do the buses access, and I know they come all the way down, much farther down, but when they leave, where do they, how do they get out? Do they just go back up Dock Street and out past the market?
Correct. Yep. And they make a left right there. Yep. Leaving Dock Street by Mission Barbecue.
Huh. So I wonder if the traffic flow would be
Well,
less
and with
impactful if you reverse the traffic flow, so that at least the only the intersectional impact is at the corner of Randall and Prince George, but it's the turn is onto Prince George coming down towards the dock as opposed to going the other way. I just toss that out.
And with what I just mentioned, if we were able to figure out how the buses could, make that loop down by Susan Campbell Park, they could continue the same route that they're doing now rather than using Prince George Street.
all interested.
Terry,
Yes.
let me just make a comment that someone just said. Why don't the buses just go back out Dock Street?
Well, it's the question of then now getting turned around in this area here. And it might be the easier solution, but I mean, you think about the length of that bus, it's going to be backing and filling to go back out this way. I don't know whether it's any easier that they came in this way, but that's going the wrong way and then turned in this way. But
It probably
I'm not,
could be
I'm not,
done.
I'm not a
Right.
traffic engineer, so.
Right. I see Heather has her hand up.
Yes, Heather.
Hi, I'm with the Naval Academy Business Services Division, but Jake knows I've spent the last few decades of my life down at City Dock with motor coaches, receiving tour groups from all across the country. One of the roles that I am responsible for at the Naval Academy is to receive these groups. And the best suggestion that I've heard over the last several years, honestly, is what Jake just put forward with the drive-through concept. The Naval Academy is not interested in parking buses anywhere downtown, nor is it a legal thing to do. We do not encourage buses to linger. Our main economic drive for tourism in Annapolis is focused on getting those folks safely off the coach and getting the coach out of town. And then the only time we want to bring our coaches back in is to safely have an exit strategy for our guests. So the drive-through approach, if we came in up Dock Street and continue all the way around, perhaps behind the stage, like Jake mentioned, I think we could then still keep the same traffic pattern, go out and make the left and go out, or even go Craig Street and make that left on Prince George. Our buses now, post 9/11 from the Naval Academy, utilize this space daily, 7 days a week. And I can tell you we're up to post-COVID numbers of over 1 million visitors per year. And again, I think it's just a case of the best route possible. I know, having worked with Jake over the years, that the ability to have access close to the waterfront for our visitors of all different types of needed accommodations is very important. And I would just make one last point and then I'll stop. I did see the slide 33 from the February 2nd presentation of the City Dock Reimagined, and Debbie had sent this slide over. I just want to make sure that everybody understands, again, that we're not interested in parking any buses. So in this slide, when I see 2 coaches parked there, to me, that's wasted space. I do see cars parallel parked to the dock in those spaces on Dock Street, and that could be utilized for overflow, for offloading when we have multiple coaches come in. Often Watermark and the Naval Academy and Historic Annapolis all have large groups that come in that need to offload all at once. I think that space might be better utilized overall.
Thank you, Heather. And thank you for joining us. I know Debbie had emailed me, and I'm glad you were able to get on the list and have that input. Heather, have you had any direct involvement with Eileen and the nitty gritty? So
yes, so I started working with her and our CFO at the Naval Academy, Joe Rubino, whom many of you know, and the architectural plan several years ago. So we have been very vocal about the need for access, and trying to drive home. It's really about the economic value for our local businesses. Every seat on every coach translates to dollars spent in our local business, both the maritime businesses, our retail dining locations, all of our souvenir shops, our galleries, you name it. And we have the analytical data to prove that. So right now, Annapolis is seen as a premier destination, not just for people coming on their own for a long weekend, but for these large tour operators that come from across the nation. So I think this is a very important piece to this puzzle. I do think, though, that there's room for opportunity to have that drive-through, a debark and exit for our guests very safely in the way that this is laid out now, with just some slight modifications. And I think it would also accommodate, of course, the space we need for our fire and EMT services. I know that that's always been a concern, having worked on the dock myself for a number of years. Having the ability to have first responders get directly to the waterfront as soon as humanly possible is a huge priority.
And Frida, I think that's a priority for the Naval Academy as well, to have some emergency access there. Is that one of the emergency plans?
Right, absolutely. We did have a spot picked out in a meeting with Beth and the fire department and the Coast Guard, Susan Campbell, but now we're going to be talking about the end of Prince George Street and meeting ambulance there is one of our possible emergency evacuation spots for an injured person on the water. A lot of our people are in doing the Chicago MAC race this weekend and up in Maine. So we won't get anything done until classes start again next month. But it's I've emailed everybody and it's on our agenda to get together and talk about that again.
And as Frida, as you and I emailed back and forth, there's also the issue of the fact that there's going to be a year or two of construction and it wouldn't be available anyway. So some alternative, even if it's short term, needs to be found, just because of the disruption that's going to be going on any given day. May or may not be able to get an emergency vehicle down there reliably.
Exactly. And we've identified some others, but I did like your suggestion about Fifth Street over by where the fire parks. So we'll be coming up with something, and Beth, I'm sure we'll be wanting to meet with you again on that. Thank you.
And you've got, particularly if you've got emergency vehicles that are coming out of Eastport or out of Forest Drive, to make that extra trip downtown on a crowded day is certainly going to be easier to get them in and out of Eastport than probably out of downtown. But
I think the problem with that was getting them to the hospital once they're in the ambulance, if they're in Eastport and they have to deal with the bridge and downtown traffic. So, we have a lot of factors to consider.
I guess it's a question, are you slow to getting the EMT there in the first place, or are you slow getting to the hospital with the EMT?
Well, so far we've only brought people back to the academy and had Naval Academy ambulances meet at our dock and leave out gate 8. So and we've only had to do that, I think, twice in the last 4 or 5 years. So
It's kind of the ideal exit strategy.
And one thing to add. Sorry. Well, one thing to add, if we were able to make this access down Susan Campbell and then wrap around and come back out for bus drop off, that would encourage them not to park at all, because they would be making that circle, they would be dropping off or picking up, and then they would be continuing outside of the city and they wouldn't be parking. So it would just give them some more encouragement.
Yes, Andy. Oh. So let me ask Heather and Jake, what's your suggestion on how to bring this more to the forefront? Because everybody there's not enough real estate to do what everybody wants to do. And so how do we bring this concept to the forefront, particularly the fact that the traffic pattern would go right down somewhere in this area, and therefore take away from, kids running back and forth, et cetera, whatever the mayor and the planners have envisioned. What's your thinking on how we bring this issue to for consideration?
So I would mention, I'm trying to be as open-minded and think from the factor that you have to find a way to compromise. I sit on the Downtown Annapolis Partnership, so I do represent several local businesses that are members with us and their priorities, but I also sit on the Chesapeake Crossroads Heritage Association board, and that's the heritage story and the maritime story and the history of our beautiful waterfront. So I'm trying to blend all of these along with the visitorship to the city and the Naval Academy. And I think to go back to how to present the alternatives to blend all of this, you have this beautiful waterfront park that brings cultural events and music and programming and a venue space. So that is feeding the vibrancy downtown, but it's still very walkable and pedestrian friendly. However, if we look to other waterfront city dock areas that have been redeveloped over the years, I think we could find some really great examples to share between Jake and I of other downtown areas that they have blended the two seamlessly so that we have that ability to bring in guests from all across the country to also enjoy the beautiful waterfront area safely. I think that's the key in figuring out the traffic patterns so that it's a very controlled, safe route for the coaches to come through slowly and offload and then leave. And I do think the two can live together in harmony. I think perhaps we just need to find some good examples. Jake and I, perhaps, I don't want to speak for you, Jake, but of other downtown areas that have blended the two. I feel like there are good examples across the country.
I think that would be important in particular to show how it works, because I mean, a lot of the drive of this starts at the top with the mayor, and the mayor has his own vision of this whole area. And I think you're not, unless the mayor is convinced of the merits of this and that it just will not detract from what his vision of this area is, then I've always found that if an idea gets passed down from on top, it generally gets favorable reception down below. If it starts down below, it oftentimes never makes it to the top. So perhaps, get some ideas or examples of how it can work, and then see if you can get an audience with the mayor and Eileen at the same time to at least conceptually have that brought out, because I think that would be the way that, as I said, top down is probably better than bottom up.
Yeah, I agree. And this is a fresh idea, but happy to do the legwork.
Yep. All right. Anybody else have anything on this or any other topic? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? I didn't see somebody put a hand up. I got to stop screen sharing so I can see. There we go. Mr. Trogdon would like to get back to cocktail hour. It's only 5 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock on the West Coast.
It's after 5, so it's time.
It's time. Is there a second? Mr. Allen has seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Kimberly, thank you very much. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, everybody. As the old song goes, see you in September.